Welcome back, boys and girls, for part 3 of our story about the Velveteen Rabbit. I'm Dr. Socks, and I'm going to read again to you this story. And do you remember where we left off? We last heard about how the Velveteen Rabbit was put in a sack with all the dirty toys and books that had germs on them because when the boy was sick, the doctor said he can't keep those things anymore. And so let's find out what happens now. Are you ready? I hope you're staying well, staying safe. And here we go. That night, the boy slept in a different bedroom, and he had a new bunny to sleep with him. It was a splendid bunny with white plush and real glass eyes. But the boy was too excited to care about that bunny. For tomorrow he was going to the seaside, and that in itself was a wonderful thing, and he could think of nothing else. And while the boy was asleep, dreaming of the seaside, the Velveteen Rabbit laid among the old picture books in the corner back of the house and felt very lonely. The sack had been left untied, and so by wiggling a bit, he was able to get his head out through an opening and look all around. He shivered a little, for he had always been used to sleeping in a proper bed, and by this time his coat had worn so thin and threadbare from hugging that it no longer protected him from the cold. Nearby he could see the thicket of raspberries growing tall and close like a tropical jungle, where he used to play with the boy in bygone days. He thought of those long sunlit hours of summer in the garden, and how happy the boy and the rabbit were together. And a great sadness overfell him. He seemed that all of that passed before him, and each more beautiful than the other, those dreams, the fairy huts, the flower beds, the quiet evenings, the sunsets, all in the woods that lay behind the house, and not to forget the little ants that ran over his paws. Those were wonder-filled days, and that was when he remembered he was real. He thought of the skin horse, so wise and gentle, and all that the skin horse had told him when they were in the nursery together. Of what use would it be loved and lose one's beauty and become real if all of this ended? And a real tear trickled down his shabby velvet nose and fell to the ground. And then a strange thing happened, for there, where the tear had fallen, a flower grew out of the ground, a mysterious flower. Not at all like any that grew in the garden. It had a slender green leaves and the color of emeralds, and in the center of the leaves a blossom like a golden cup. It was so beautiful that the little rabbit, this is what the rabbit saw. Do you know what that is in the flower? Let's read and find out. It was so beautiful that the little rabbit forgot to cry and just lay there watching. And presently the blossom opened and out of it stepped a fairy. You see that? Oh, she's holding the bunny. She was quite the loveliest fairy in the whole world. Her dress was of pearl and dewdrops, and there were flowers around her neck and in her hair and in her face, like the most perfect flower of all. And she came so close to the little rabbit and gathered him up in her arms and kissed him on his velveteen nose that was all damp from crying. "Little rabbit," she said, "don't you know who I am?" The rabbit looked up at her, and it seemed to him that he had seen her face before, but she couldn't quite think where that was. "I am the nursery magic fairy," she said. "I take care of all the playthings that the children have loved. And when they are old and worn out, and the children don't need them anymore, I come and take them away with me and turn them into real." "Wasn't I real before?" asked the little rabbit. "You were real to the little boy," said the fairy, "because he loved you. Now you shall be real to everyone." And she held the little rabbit close in her arms and flew with him into the wood. The light was low, for the moon had risen, and the forest was beautiful, and the fronds of the brackets shone like frosted silver. And in the open glade between the tree trunks, the wild rabbits danced with their shadows on the velvet grass. But when they saw the fairy, they all stopped dancing and stood around in a ring and stared at her. "Do you see? There's the nursery rabbit, or the nursery fairy, and all the rabbits dancing around in the woods." What a wonderful story this is turning out to be. The rabbits are staring at the nursery magic fairy. And she says, "I brought you a new playfellow. You must be very kind to him and teach him all he needs to know about Rabbitland, for he's going to live with you forever and ever." And she kissed the little Velveteen Rabbit again, who had now become real, and put him down on the grass. "Run and play, little rabbit," she said. But the little rabbit sat quite still for a moment and never moved. For when he saw all the wild rabbits dancing around him, suddenly he remembered about his hind legs, and he didn't want them to see that he was made all in one piece. He didn't know that when the fairy kissed him the last time, she had changed him altogether. And he might have sat there a long time, too shy to move, if just then something hadn't tickled his nose, and before he thought he was doing, he lifted his hind toes to scratch it. Look at this. Instead of a bunch, he's got legs, hind legs, to scratch his nose that tickled. And he found that he actually had hind legs, yes. Instead of a dingy velveteen brown fur, soft and shiny, his ears by themselves twitched. And his whiskers were so long that they brushed against the grass. He gave one leap, and the joy of using those hind legs was so great he went springing about the turf on them, jumping sideways, whirling around as the others did. And he grew so excited when at last he did stop to look at the fairy. She had gone. He was a real rabbit at last, at home with other rabbits. Autumn passed, and winter passed, and in the spring, when the days grew warm and sunny, the little boy, who was now well, went out to play in the woods behind the house. And while he was playing, two rabbits crept out from the fur and the weeds and peeped at him. And one of them was brown all over, but the other had strange markings under his fur, as though long ago he had been spotted. And the spots still showed through. And about his little soft nose and his round black eyes, there was something familiar. So that the boy thought to himself, why, he looks just like my old bunny that I lost when I had my fever. Look at that. The boy notices something familiar about this bunny. It looks like his old bunny that was once a toy and now was real. But the boy never knew that it was really his old bunny, come back to look at the child who had first told him he was real. And that's the end of our story of how toys become real. Velveteen Rabbit. And I hope you boys and girls have enjoyed my reading in 3 parts. Again, stay well, stay safe, and remember to wash your hands and to wear your mask so that when we can come back together at the Head Start program, I can join you again and read before you our wonderful books. Thank you and goodbye.